For someone who studied business, I don't really follow business news that much, if for no other reason than my own sanity. But I do love Infinity Train, and I just finished watching it when news broke that it and like 30 other shows were being canceled and taken down in a purge for what amounts to a tax write-off. Which is insane. The idea that the things I and so many others love can be taken away instantly and without warning is harrowing. Harrowing, but not new. You know, you don't actually buy media on iTunes. You just get permission to download them, and then they can be deleted off your device without notice. Spotify's similar, but at least you're paying a flat rate no matter how much you listen. Which, you know, now everything is a subscription service. Platforms change guidelines and content creators change whims. Once, everything I wanted to watch was on Netflix, and then there was Hulu, then HBO Max. Now everything's scattered and fractured. Everywhere you look, it's you will own nothing and be happy. The good news is, though, I think people are finally getting tired of it. After the HBO Max purges, I've never seen so much open support for legal archiving from so many people at once, including showrunners themselves. So I knew what I had to do. I knew even before I noticed the change in public sentiment. I'd had practice. On July 23rd, 2021, all unlisted YouTube videos posted before 2017 were made private. That means that even with the link, you couldn't see them. This day was devastating to me in a way that is only really comparable to what happened with HBO Max. See, back in the early 2010s, there was a podcast I listened to, a podcast I'd loved for years that was only available in an unlisted playlist. There were no archives, no other sites they were posted on, and no one was active on the channel anymore. On that day in July, the podcast was gone. Well, gone from the internet. I downloaded most of the episodes on my iPad years ago. My Generation 1 iPad that had never been updated past iOS 5. My Generation 1 iOS 5 iPad whose single charger cord was yellowing and decaying, sticky to the touch. Old and near death as it was the last place the podcast existed, at least to my knowledge and that of the skeletal online community that remained. For myself, as well as that community, I had to do something. You know, I can see how people like Terry Davis can wax religious about stuff like this. Suddenly, I felt like I was in possession of sacred texts. The world needed them, but the slightest touch could destroy them forever. I thought about downloading iTunes and trying to sync the files down. Older iDevices seemed to have a better file structure that was easier to crack open, but I didn't want to risk a forced update that would brick my decade-old tablet. So I did something you might call a hacky solution. I bought an aux cord, plugged in my iPad on one end and Audacity on the other, and I just played each episode one by one. It was crude and a lot of quality was lost in the transfer. But the files were mine. They couldn't be taken away, and their survival was in my hands. At first, I uploaded them to YouTube. I had delusions of grandeur, visions of me being a hero to countless weirdos who still like to podcast from years ago. And I got a bit of that, but the more I observed the remaining fandom, I started to notice they were, well, weird. At first, I thought, hey, you know, they're just kids, but then I remembered this is a channel that died in the early 2010s. All of these people were my age or older. So like the entropy that forced me to this extreme, I decided on a whim to take it all down again. My savior complex became an esoteric mystery religion complex. Finally putting my St. Balasar University IT degree to good use, I set up a file server, and to this day am the podcast's sole proprietor and listener. In doing this, I gave the fandom a second tragedy, one I took no small pleasure in. That's what you get for asking creepy, invasive questions on Reddit and spamming crayon Hatsune Miku fan art. That file server, a $100 ThinkPad T420 I pumped full of RAM, sat idle for a while before I could find something else to do with it. At this point, I was a year or two out of St. Balasar. I'd moved into a house back in my hometown and made some new friends, and I found a decent job that paid the bills, but nothing I was doing was really that fulfilling. If anything, archiving the podcast made me feel worse. It just impressed on me the passage of time and how insane I was for even caring about something like this. I wanted to make something, not only create it, but share it with others. The English Club podcast is one result of that impulse. My Minecraft server was my second attempt. This is something I'd wanted to do forever, but I could never fully commit to setting up and troubleshooting it. But this time I stuck to it. I had a harder time setting up the server than I'd care to admit, but when it first spun to life, I was ecstatic. I sat in the parking lot of the Starbucks down the road and watched as a world elsewhere came into being. I didn't even intend for that world to be the one the server used. I was just trying to see if it would work, but then I got way too carried away and ended up building a brick house in the sky. I shared the IP with my friends' group chat, and that night, people separated from each other by miles gathered in my world. We settled by a river running serpentine westward from the ocean. Under the shadow of rocky, imposing hills, we made our first homes. A friend of mine, Steven, built a little wooden glass house at the top of a mountain and named the structure Bohemian Grove. My roommate, solitary in real life, settled on a hill far down the river in an oddly made shack with even more interesting signs inside. One of us got lost and set up a base 500 blocks away by accident. Others made mines but had no clear homes, and to this day, I'll occasionally find man-made structures no one can vouch for. All in all, not a very centralized group, but it was quirky and fun, a reflection of us in real life. Shortly into the server's history, we had someone join our friend group, an old friend of mine, Kaya, who washed up here after college, kind of like I did. She never played Minecraft or any video game for that matter, but somehow Steven convinced her. We had to explain everything, from getting on Discord to basic controls, often over and over and over. And I loved it. I would sit on Discord for hours helping Kaya craft her first wooden pickaxe like it was my sacred duty. But these efforts weren't even slightly altruistic. No, I'd been playing Minecraft for over 10 years now, and that happy era of playing Minecraft as a child had been buried under a decade of numb muscle memory. Within these moments of teaching my friend how to play Minecraft was a spark of wonder, the closest I've come to that first feeling of exploration and discovery since I legally archived an alpha version of the game in 2011. I watched with almost paternal joy as Kaya settled down on an ugly, rocky riverside in the shadow of the mountain and built a hideous bloggy house out of clashing types of wood. Kaya didn't know how to fight monsters or craft or just about anything, and she happily spent all her time collecting flowers for her garden that she'd gotten Steven to carve into the stone. She was just so damn proud of it, and she showed people who hung out with us in real life, people who didn't even know what Minecraft is. One time, a couple people with hacked clients jumped onto the server and burned everything down. To Kaya, it was a vague and mysterious threat from a place far away. To me, it was a mildly annoying setback caused by misconfiguring the server, easily undone with a rollback and a flip switch. Something about Kaya's perspective seems more fun. Over the weeks, my interest in actually playing the game waned. I'd spend more time watching a map from above as though the server were an ant farm. It was surreal seeing something I'd created becoming a part of people's daily rituals, seeing how much the landscape had changed around me. But I wasn't the only one logging in less. After a few weeks, some people had quit entirely and others logged in only every other day. Looking at the logs, we'd often miss each other, meaning that if your attendance was good, you'd often log on to an empty server but with new weird structures, which gave me an idea for a really funny prank. And that's all it was at first, a prank. You see, in real life, my friend Steven lives in a little house in the middle of nowhere, literally on the other side of the city from me. One day, I drove to his house and walked around the property, taking pictures that I accidentally posted in our group chat. I drew a map of the floor plan that I put up on the fridge to see if he'd ever notice when he came over. Steven's house was simple and made out of materials that translated easily into Minecraft, and we had a habit of messing with each other. This is a guy who in another server filled my base with TNT after all. So one day while I was at work, Steven and Kaya logged into the server to find a recreation of his real-life house, complete with an elaborate U-inspired dungeon under his bedroom. I still think I creeped him out a lot more than he let on, but honestly it was worth it just for the bit. It was only after I meticulously rebuilt my friend's house in survival mode when things started to get weird. Now, I'm sure this is a common phenomenon, but a lot of my relationship with Minecraft deals with memory. Like any kid with attention problems, I rarely just played Minecraft. I'd have something on the other half of my screen or playing in the background. But the thing is, unlike most everything else in my life, I had a good memory for it. To this day, even with builds from back in 2011, I can remember exactly what I was watching or listening to in the moment. In high school, I would use this to my advantage and I would listen to recordings of my classes. And now I can't look at my potato farm without thinking of the Federalist Party during the late 1700s. What made building Stephen's house interesting is I'd never tried to recreate real buildings before. I never expected that the phenomenon of remembering what I was doing while playing Minecraft would work in reverse. Building Stephen's house in Minecraft preserved my memories of his real house in Amber. I could remember the drunken Nerf wars, the sword fights and boxing matches out in the carport, the first time I heard a leak of Kanye West 24. It was a digital monument to a scary, fun, beautiful time when none of us had any direction in life and the responsibilities of adult life hadn't yet taken over. Walking through this facsimile of my friend's house in one of the most tumultuous times of my life, I had a revelation. I could preserve the world as I wanted it. I could rediscover forgotten memories and keep them, however simplified, in time forever. I could archive Infinity Train, every podcast I've ever listened to, and my most cherished memories. Next, I built my college dorm, even though I hated college and had no reason to want to remember the place. Same thing. I remembered in which rooms I met certain people, some of whom became good friends, others I haven't spoken to in years, but it was still comforting to know that there was a place these memories survived. I went a little crazy with it. I built my house, which was surreal in its own way, another friend's house, and the apartment one of my best friends lived in before he got married and moved away. That apartment was my escape from reality, and I'm never going to forget the 2 years that my friend lived there. Part of me is still smoking my first cigar out on that shitty porch or stumbling around drunk in the parking lot after failing to recreate the Holy Roman Empire out of Jell-O shots, thinking the world was still ahead of me. To allow that to fade away, to allow myself to forget, would feel like an act of violence against myself. With these recreations, these memories, these archives, these train cars, I have at least some level of control over that. It was around the time I was spawning in a wolf named after my friend's sister's dog that I realized I had gone too far. Time is a river. The landscape may look the same as you remember, but you'll never step into the same water twice. And while it's okay to take pictures or prevent companies from wiping the river off the face of the earth for a tax write-off, the idea that it's possible or good to recreate the river is folly. You have to move on. I don't touch the server much anymore, but it's still running. I've disabled the whitelist again, taken down all the security against the ravages of time. I still check the map from time to time just to see if anything's changed, almost hoping my server's been invaded again. If griefers find my server, then they can go crazy. I'm ready for the world to change. Besides, I have backups. Thanks for watching. New English Club episodes are coming out soon. This is just an experiment with a different kind of video. Let me know in the comments below what beloved piece of media was taken from you forever. If you like this video, be sure to legally archive it. And I'll see you guys around campus.